All right, well, I think we have most of our people in here. We are still waiting for one panelist. We'll get her joined as soon as she gets on, but we're gonna get started. Good morning to everyone, to those of us here in Nevada, and good afternoon to our panelists that are joining us from the East Coast. My name is Todd Hartline, and I'm one of the law enforcement liaisons for the Nevada Office of Traffic Safety. Thank you for joining us this morning for our automated traffic enforcement webinar. This is the first of what we hope will be several opportunities to provide timely traffic safety information to our stakeholders and partners when initiatives like this arrive. Many of you have worked for, with, or alongside our administrator, Amy Davey, and you're well aware she's always looking for new ways to collaborate, share information, and find workable solutions for our traffic safety problems. And using this venue is her latest innovation. With that said, please give us a little grace, as you can tell, and a little leniency today, as this is our first foray with trying this. For some background on automated traffic enforcement here in Nevada, it's been presented to our legislature multiple times in the past, but has never gained traction. This year, the Assembly Committee for Growth and Infrastructure enrolled a bill draft request, which would allow automated traffic enforcement in school zones. Just yesterday, language for the bill was released, and this piece of legislation is now Assembly Bill 93. If you check the chat, one of the very first submissions on the chat is the link to the language. This is one of our traffic safety legislative priorities, and we will monitor this bill closely as it moves through the process. As currently authored, automated traffic enforcement systems will be allowed that govern speed limits in school zones and school zone crossings, as well as provisions prohibiting U-turns and the overtaking of another vehicle in school zones and school crossings. We know automated traffic enforcement aligns with the Safe Systems approach and is specifically listed in the National Roadway Safety Strategy as an element to achieve safer speeds. It is also a recommendation in GHSA's Equity and Highway Safety Enforcement and Engagement programs. We are really excited today to have put together a panel of people from across the country who work with automated traffic enforcement on a daily basis and have a wealth of knowledge and experience with these systems and processes. The state of Georgia authorized automated traffic enforcement in school zones beginning in 2018. And we have 2 members of law enforcement agencies from Georgia that manage these programs. With the understanding of Nevada's mostly rural makeup and a couple of larger population centers that we have, we tried to do the same thing from Georgia. We have a lieutenant from a smaller rural agency and a corporal from a larger, more urban agency. From the City of Chamblee Police Department, we have Lieutenant Roy Collar joining us. Chamblee is a city in the northern part of the state with a population of about 30,000 residents. And the larger agency, we have Corporal Eric Klein from the Gwinnett County Police Department. Gwinnett County is just outside of Atlanta and has a population of around 1 million residents. We also have from the Minnesota Office of Traffic Safety, Raya Geisler. Hopefully she's joining us. I haven't seen if she's made it yet. Raya oversees a large school bus safety grant where the cameras are affixed on school bus arms. And in Minnesota, it's unique in the way that they provide funding for large school districts that own several hundred buses, all the way down to a private owner that might have just 1 or 2 buses. And lastly, from Conduit Transportation, we have Scott Stewart and Sean Collins with us today. Conduit Transportation is a vendor in the automated enforcement arena, and both Scott and Sean have assisted local authorities with the acquisition, implementation, and management of automated enforcement solutions. Scott works out of Southern California and has experience assisting agencies out here on the West Coast. I wanted to provide some quick recent data to highlight the speeding problem we have in our school zones. In Washoe County, the Nevada State Police and the Reno Police Department each have a school zone safety grant through our office. Between the 2 agencies in the 21-22 school year, they issued just under 1,000 speeding citations. This initiative was started because of a large number of crashes involving students on their way to and from school, including a student that was killed. Additionally, in the southern part of the state, from August of 2019 to present, the Clark County School District Police Department has made over 4,100 traffic stops and issued over 3,700 speeding citations in school zones, which emphasizes the problem that we do have in our state. A couple of quick housekeeping items. Please keep yourself muted during the webinar. We're going to have each panel member take 5 to 10 minutes to describe their programs, describe how they manage their programs and the process for implementation. Please submit your questions through the chat. We have time set aside at the back end of the webinar to answer as many questions as possible, though we're going to try to hold this to right around an hour. Okay, without further ado, let's get to our subject matter experts. And first up is Lieutenant Roy Collar. Lieutenant, the floor is yours.
Hope everybody's doing good. I wouldn't say I'm a subject matter expert, but I was kind of thrown into this, but I've been doing this since RedSpeed. RedSpeed is our vendor, and we've been using this starting in the early 2021. So basically started with some complaints through our school zones to the county. We're in DeKalb County, which is just outside of Atlanta or Metro Atlanta.
Everyone's in.
Like you said, we have a population of about 30,000 with an influx with our two major highways that come in during rush hour for add another 15,000. Bunch of complaints through obviously the parents with the kids in the school zone. So we started looking into it. While my traffic unit started going into and doing speed enforcement. Then, like you said, in 2018, automated speed enforcement was approved. So we started looking into that. We had RedSpeed come to a speed study, found out we actually did have a speed problem. The issue with our problem with our city was DeKalb County, the county schools didn't want anything to do with it. So we have a private school that we used, or not used, but a private school that agreed and wanted to partner with us to help with the speed enforcement they have in their school zones. So we placed 4 cameras, 2 on one road and 2 on another road, and it covers basically the north, south, east, and west directions of those roadways. Give some stats here in a little bit how that works. Right now, we had 6 people on my unit, down to 2 for promotions and people leaving, but between the 2 of us, in 2021, when we first initiated this in February of 2021, we had a 30-day grace period, a warning period. Basically, we sent social media out, talked to the school, talked to the parents, had meetings, let everybody know about it, that this was going to happen. So the 30-day warning period took effect. In March of 2021, we started enforcing it. And just to kind of give you some stats between the 4 cameras that we had from March until December, we had 10,557 violations, and these are just 2-lane roads. These are not major highways. On an average, that's averaged about 1,300 a month that we had to clear or basically go onto the system and check them, make sure they're valid, and go ahead and clear them and send them off to be violations. Out of those 10,000, a little over 10,000 cases, we had 106 cases where people have contested them. In order to contest them, they had to go through the vendor. They fill out a form. Once the form is completed, basically saying that they weren't the driver, they have to provide the information of who was driving. If they don't do that, they have to come to court in front of a judge, and then the judge decides if they're going to dismiss it or do the fine anyways. Normal fines for our city, again, this is not a money issue, but just to kind of give you how it works. Our fines, normal if an officer's running laser or radar, the fine's $150 to $175, depending on what the speed is. This is just a $75 fine flat. It's civil, it's not criminal. So it has nothing to do with their driver's license. It can't affect their driver's license if they don't pay. The only thing through the state of Georgia that can do to enforce if they do not pay is they can put a lien on their registration. Basically, they can't get a new registration title or tag or decal for their tag unless it's taken care of. So in 2020, we had 10,557. The next year, 2022, from January to December, just kind of show you if it works or not. It dropped down to 6,627, so a 37% decrease in violations that we had in that school zone. The average dropped about 830 a month. An officer needed to check, and the court cases dropped about 64 cases during that time period. Usually it takes an officer, when we log in, if there's 400 to 500 violations that we have to approve, it takes probably about 15 to 20 minutes to go through it. It's not difficult. It's very user friendly for us. Some of the challenges that we've had from citizens basically is challenging the case law, which the case law backs us. easily. It's pretty easy defendable. The signs where we posted for our school zones, the 2 roads that we have, it's 25 miles an hour all the time anyways. So it doesn't adjust. How we work it is an hour before the school starts and an hour after the school ends. We give them 11 over. During the school time, the regular school day, we give them 14 over. So it's just no different than an officer sitting there running laser the whole time. It's just the cameras do it for us. Obviously with the stats that I just gave you, it does work. Even for our two, it's reduced greatly. And then, like I said, it's pretty much user friendly. Check my notes real quick, make sure. So one of the other issues about calibration, it's no different than radar and LiDARs that you might use in y'all's jurisdictions. They're calibrated yearly by RedSpeed. They give us a copy of that, so we bring that to court just like we would using our tools that we use daily anyways. So we have a copy of that. The court has a copy of it. And then once they challenge the calibration of the units, we have those on file as well. And again, like I said, the vendor we use, RedSpeed, takes care of that for us on a yearly basis. That's pretty much covers us for a small jurisdiction and what we use them for.
Thank you very much, sir. And just a quick follow-up question, again, for your kind of smaller jurisdiction, how many people do you have that work on the automated traffic enforcement, your program? Is it just you, or do you have other people in there? And then what are the man hours? Because I know that's something that's going to come up for our agencies here in Nevada, is what that looks like for their workforce to try to maintain a system.
So for us, there's 2 of us that constantly look at it. We try to check it on a daily basis. Obviously, during holidays and summer and spring break, we don't have to worry about it because school's not in session. But usually we try to keep it on, if you keep it on a daily basis, you're talking maybe 30 minutes at the most on a daily basis between officers. If for some reason something happens and we lag on it a couple of days, it might take a little longer than that, because obviously the more citations. I think the most that we've had where we've kind of forgot to check on it and we checked on it, we had about 1,000 violations, and that took literally 30-35 minutes. She was clearing some and I was clearing some at the same time. It doesn't take long. Like I said, it's very user friendly. Basically all we do is check the vehicle, make sure the information on the automated citation is correct and matches the vehicle. And then we approve it. Some of the other questions we have is what happens if it's a law enforcement vehicle that's basically how we handle it for our policy is that we dismiss it as administrative decision, but on the notes we put on there that it's forwarded to a supervisor per our policy, and then the supervisor basically looks at our call to see if the area where the officer was allowed to run at a higher speed. If not, the officers gets a written up for it for that, just so it's handled that way as well.
Very good. I know our people participating are going to have questions for you later, but I really appreciate you going over the program. And we will pass it on to Corporal Klein out of Gwinnett County.
Hey, good morning, everyone. When we first started to get into this idea of speed cameras, we looked at complaints from school bus drivers, parents, and from general citizens about speeding in the school zones. We also looked at accident data for school zones, how much pedestrian traffic we'll have at a specific school, because we have the largest school system in the state of Georgia in Gwinnett County. So we have different demographics where some schools you'll have more pedestrian traffic than you'll have at some of the other schools. We looked at fatality data, and we looked at schools that have crossing guards versus schools that don't have crossing guards. We also looked at schools that were on 4-lane roads instead of 2-lane roads to begin with. The commission voted for approval of the cameras, and we started in November of 2021 with our program. Right now, we have 6 schools that we have cameras that are at, for a total of 10 cameras that are active every day. A camera in each one of our commission districts. And basically, before a school can be approved for a camera, we have to do a speed study on the roadway. The speed study runs for 10 hours on one day of school. And the Georgia DOT requires a minimum of 100 speeders over 11 miles an hour in a 10-hour period before they'll approve a permit for a school to be chosen for a camera. We issue about 5,000 a week in citations. So we stay busy in here. I'm the only one that's full-time assigned to this unit. I'm the speed enforcement unit for the schools. I have one part-time officer that works with me. He's a retired lieutenant. He works back with the police department part-time, so he's assigned to the unit as well. So there's two of us. And also we're in a position where we have about 800 sworn officers. So at any given time, you're going to have 20 to 30 officers that are either on maternity leave or have injuries or on some kind of FMLA, so that they're on light duty status. And usually I can pick from those people if I need help catching up on violations, because we get about it. So that's how much manpower. And my hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I'm constantly on the system. When I'm not on the system, I'm in contact with Red Speed, the vendor, getting our next permitted schools. We have 6 more schools coming online in 2023. So my workload is going to double. So that should bring us up to about 12,000 violations. So I will definitely need some more help when that happens. Usually with the program, you have about 1% of violators who will actually contest the citations or send in an affidavit, which is a very low number. We have court the second Friday of every month. We allot 50 cases to go on our court day. Maybe 20 people show up for it. Most people will pay it right before court. They just need an extra couple of days to pay their citation. They will actually show up for court. But the people who do contest the citations, either they weren't driving or they had some kind of medical emergency that they were responding to, or getting to the hospital because their wife was having a baby, what have you. Our judge is very lenient on that. She takes that in consideration and shows compassion for those type of situations, and she'll remember those citations are lower to fine for the citation. So another thing that people will argue a lot in court is that the lights weren't flashing when they got caught speeding. For some reason, people don't understand that the camera runs all day during school hours, not just when the lights are flashing. The lights are only flashing an hour before school and an hour after school to slow traffic down by 10 or 20 miles an hour, in order to slow traffic down for the school buses that are pulling in and out of the schools during those 1 hour before and 1 hour after. But the cameras also run when the lights aren't flashing at the normal speed limit. And so we have a program that runs our lights in the school zones for the flashing lights. It's a company called Glance. And I have access to get onto Glance. And before court, we'll get an evidence packet from Red Speed that will have the calibration of the radar, when it was last calibrated. It does a self-check every single day for the internal components and things like that to make sure that the camera's working prior to even turning on every single morning. About 4:15 in the morning, we do a self-test on it every single day. It's calibrated. But with the evidence package, I'll print out my Glance report showing what time the flashing lights turned on, how long they were on, and when they were off. But on that report, it will also tell me if a light bulb was out in one of the flashing signs, if it had a lightning strike, if the batteries inside the sign from the solar panel are bad, things like that. So recently we had a situation where one of the batteries in the solar panel was bad in one of our flashing signs for about 6 days. And so I had to refund about 400 citations and delete about 2,000 citations for those. So we want to be as transparent as possible. We're not hiding in the shadows. We're not, trying to do anything we're not supposed to do. So in the spirit of fairness, we just refunded about 400 people's violations. and dismissed a bunch of other ones. Before we got started with the program, we did a lot of public awareness on social media, press releases, and the website. We have a portion of our website that explains the cameras, how they work, what we have each school listed on our website, what time the lights are flashing, what the speed limit is. I ran stats for repeat offenders, so people who've gotten more than one citation starting with October of last year. And it went from 286 in October to 276 in November to 256 in December. So those repeat offenders are going down slowly, but we have such a large, we have 438 square miles in the county, and we are a major thoroughfare to go to Atlanta from Athens. So we have a lot of people that come through our county that don't live in our county. So a lot of our citations, a good majority of our citations are people who don't live here. So as far as seeing a reduction over time, usually they say it's about a 6 to 8 month turnaround before you actually see a reduction, because once the cameras first start, people get on social media, they're griping about it, hey, slow down, they're trying to, people speaking at this location. So the word gets out pretty quick to the local people, but the people who pass through and don't live here, obviously, they don't get that advance warning, although we have signs.
Very good. Really quick follow-up with you as well. Walk us through a little bit when you go to court. If somebody challenges one of these citations that it ends up in court, are you the individual that goes to court for the police department because you manage the system? And then also, what kind of evidence does the system produce for you that you take with you to the court proceeding?
Yeah, so I will do the testifying for the light duty officers who approve violations, because I don't want to bring them into court with crutches and wheelchairs and things like that. So I'll testify for those officers, but my part-time officer who works in here, he'll testify on his own cases. But I'm the prosecutor. I do all the talking. I present the case to the judge, answer questions from the violator in front of the judge. And then, it's a strict liability violation, so you're not looking beyond a reasonable doubt. You're looking at 51% preponderance of the evidence. As the law is written right now, we can't compel someone to tell us who was driving if they weren't driving. Some legislation last year, but it didn't get passed. So we can't compel someone to say, yes, it was my brother-in-law who was driving the car, so we can then transfer the liability to that person. If they say they weren't driving, it just gets tossed out on the spot. So before court, on the system, I can go in and pull up a tab that says scheduled court hearings. I'll look at my next court hearing date, which basically I get with the court to set. We do it on the second Friday of every month, unless it's a holiday. And each one of the cases that are going to court, Red Speed already has an evidence package put together. It's between 8 and about 12 pages worth of evidence. And the first piece of evidence you'll have is the actual copy of the citation, the front and the back of the citation. Then I'll have the short video that the camera takes. It'll have a still photograph of the tag and a still overall of the vehicle that's driving at that location. I think people get mistaken as well, thinking that the camera is actually the device that's catching the speed, when it's not the camera itself. It's an actual radar or laser. The camera's basically showing that the car was at the location at the time of the violation. So I have had a guy come into court and say, well, based on this video from point A to point B, I couldn't have traveled in 2.2 seconds between this location and this location and been at 70 miles an hour at 45. Based on my calculations, I was doing 13 miles an hour. And like, well, yeah, that'd be cool and all, but that's not how the system works. You were caught on the radar. The radar then sends the camera a message saying, record this vehicle to show that you were at that location at that time. So, but on the evidence package, you will have the actual device that was used, the radar or the laser. It will show when it was calibrated, or it will show it self-check, that it self-checks every single day before the cameras even turn on. If there was an issue with the camera on that day, it won't even turn on. So the internal checks of the components and the circuits, if there's something going on inside the radar or the camera, it won't even turn. Does that answer your question somewhat?
Yes, no, that was perfect. Interesting to see, all the evidence that the system produces that the officer will have with them when they go to court. And I know our law enforcement folks were interested in that as well. So thank you very much, Corporal. I appreciate it. And Scott, I'm gonna turn it over to you. And as a vendor, I know that you've helped, agencies from the very first time that they contacted you to say that we want to implement a program like this, all the way through helping them get it installed and manage it, the whole process. So I know you have a lot of great information for the group, and maybe you can just walk us through an A to Z kind of implementation of a system that you've helped somebody with.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Todd. I work for Conduit in the Public Safety Solutions Division, specifically in transportation. Just a tiny bit about Conduit. We're a $4 billion company. We do business across 24 countries. And we employ about 60,000 people. So we're one of the two largest photo enforcement vendors in North America. And we, as Todd has suggested, we have provided photo enforcement solutions for multiple cities, counties, and states across the country. We provide statewide speed enforcement programs in places like Delaware, Maryland, and Illinois. And then we provide countywide programs for both red light and speed in places like Montgomery County, Prince George's County. And then we have larger cities across the country like Portland, Memphis, and Providence, Rhode Island, to name a few. So, a few things that Todd had when he had reached out, he thought might be important to cover. And when you're considering potentially implementing a program, it's important to consider that there's a lot that goes into it, right? So there are hardly any jurisdictions across the country that try to take on a lot of the scope of the services by themselves. So you've heard from two law enforcement officers who are responsible in their programs for doing final review and issuance. Maybe they have some degree of customer support that they handle as well. But it's important that when looking at a vendor, you look at all the scope of services that you want in your project and what that vendor can provide. So I'll speak to what we can provide, and a lot of this other vendors can provide as well. But it starts off from a vendor's perspective with doing the equipment installation, and there are multiple configuration options that you can choose. I believe in the two instances that you heard in Georgia, those are fixed installations where you put a system on the side of the road, so to speak, and you monitor certain directions of certain roadways. And it's very effective because in those specific locations, you see a significant drop in violations as the folks in law enforcement have identified. Other options, you can put portable camera units where you can rotate those systems to multiple locations. So it has the effect of basically having a wider array of enforcement across the entire jurisdiction, if you will. And then violators don't necessarily know where those systems are. You can also put systems inside of mobile vehicle units where officers or vendor employees can drive those systems to where they're most needed from a deployment perspective. If they're fixed installations, there's construction that's involved. Conduit and other vendors take care of that. And when we're a turnkey provider, as are some of the other vendors out there, meaning that we provide every single service that can possibly be done inside of the system, with the exception of doing that final review, which we highly recommend is done by law enforcement, although that's not mandated in some locations across the country. Portland, for example, passed legislation, I think it was about a year and a half ago, that allowed for city officials or specifically DOT officials to do final authorization because they were having so many violations that they wanted to make sure that they could process violations and not have any timeout. Violation processing and associated software that comes with that violation processing. We provide that as do other vendors, training the jurisdiction on both the front end equipment and how to use the software as well. And then speaking of the front end, providing all the maintenance associated with the camera technology. You have to print and mail the notices, which the vendor does as well. Customer service, which we at Conduit provide. You may require different languages in customer service, which we and other vendors can provide as well. Web links to the violations, so violators can view those violations and answer FAQs. Payment processing, which is allowed in most states, but not every state. So collecting that fine from the violator and then depositing it back into the jurisdiction's accounts. Collections for unpaid notices. Public awareness, which I think was mentioned by one of the earlier law enforcement officials. Incredibly important for the long-term success of any photo enforcement campaign. Court scheduling, which we do through our back-end software. Evidence packages were mentioned. Some jurisdictions require hard copy and some only want digital. So that's something that you'll have to consider as well. We also provide expert witness testimony in situations where the violator does want to adjudicate and they want to speak to a subject matter expert on the equipment itself and possibly the manufacturer of the vendor or somebody who supports that. All types of reporting and dashboards, and then it's wrapped together with program management. So that's kind of a turnkey, example, and we've done that with jurisdictions that have started from the ground up, or jurisdictions that obviously have an existing vendor that are looking to make a change. Another topic would be how a vendor is potentially paid, and this is something that can be controversial. Your fine amounts, and in the draft bill legislation, I think there's language in there that says an amount no less than $50. So you'll want to consider that as well. You may want to consider having a cap. I think it was Roy who mentioned that the fine amount in his jurisdiction is $75. Some jurisdictions have chosen to say we're going to have a graduated fine amount. Maybe it's 50 for first offense, maybe it's 100 for second and 150 for third offense, if those offenses happen within, like, let's say, an 18-month period. So those are things that you're going to want to consider. I would kind of recommend a cap on the fine amount, because if you put a minimum but don't put a cap, then you might have some rogue jurisdiction that really takes advantage of that and says, well, there's no cap, so we're going to charge whatever we want to charge. So you might want to consider that. Probably the most controversial way to do fine amounts is being paid per issued, because the vendor is potentially incented to issue as many as possible. A second way to do fines is to do per paid or a revenue sharing model. In those situations, the violator has at least admitted guilt, so that's less controversial for sure. And then the least controversial is to do a fixed amount that is representative of the value of the service, and it's a fixed fee per system per month. It's also the most risk on the vendor, because the vendor has to do the right calculations to assume how many violations are going to come in. And I know we're running short on time, so let me just see some of the other notes that might be important. Where do you put the cameras? Typically, you're going to look at traffic statistics, maybe crash fatalities in certain areas. It was mentioned earlier, citizen complaints. Also, maybe instances of where law enforcement has noticed a high degree of violations. Those are all good places to deploy. Back-end requirements, we do all of that from a vendor standpoint in terms of doing the storage. So our system, and I believe systems from other vendors, they're all web portals, right? So you essentially go into the vendor's software, and you're not hosting anything as a jurisdiction. The vendor is hosting everything, either on-prem, on premises, or in a cloud. Um, and the violators, by the way, in order to access their violation, they have to have a specific PIN code that's accessed by using their violation or citation number. So it's all very secure as well. I think there was a mention about adjudication and questions regarding the system. I think it was Eric who said, hey, the systems are all calibrated. That's accurate. They have to be calibrated yearly. And just like the system Eric mentioned, our systems don't even work. They don't even turn on if there's glitches in the system during startup. And they also don't turn on if they haven't been calibrated inside of that 1 year period. So there's a lot of fail safes inside the system that are designed to protect both the jurisdiction and us as a vendor as well, because you want a program that is sustainable, gets public support, and has the impact of decreasing citations and associated crashes and injuries. So I'll stop there and turn it back to Todd. I don't know if we have any questions, or we want to take that at the end.
Yeah, and just for all of you that are participating on there, go ahead and put your questions in the chat. I have one that was exactly the one that Amy put in here was going to be my next question. And Scott, I'll leave this with you. Opponents of automated traffic enforcement systems have there's two big arguments. One is the constitutionality that's been challenged and really has never gone anywhere. The other one is with the perception of the money grab, like we talked about in our pre-meeting. I know you've worked with several jurisdictions on implementing these systems. Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that you've seen those agencies, how their revenue is where it goes, once it passes through the police department, where it goes and where they put it? And then we'll also talk to the lieutenant and the corporal about what they do in their specific jurisdictions as well.
Sure. It's important. I think the most controversial way to divert excess revenue that is in excess of what it takes to administrate and run the program is to simply direct it into a general fund. Because if you do that, then the public, they believe that it is a money grab, that they're using that additional revenue to fund underfunded projects, to fund pet projects, whatever the case may be. The best way to funnel those funds is into public safety specific projects. So you might determine that even with automated enforcement, you're still having a high issuance rate or a high accident rate, which generally is not the case. But you might want to take those funds and put in additional engineering projects, like whether it's speed bumps, narrowing roadways. That's something that Portland has done. There's a lot of things that you can do with that funding. You can provide additional law enforcement. These funds can provide the ability to hire additional officers, potentially additional equipment. You can have those funds. I mentioned on a call that we had the other day in Texas before those programs shut down. They sent those additional funds to Texas state trauma centers. So it was able to help victims that were potentially the victims of speed related injuries. So there's a lot of things you can do, but it starts with good public awareness, a good public education campaign. You got to get in front of it, because there will be people that oppose it. But if you can prove out that, as the statistics do prove, that these systems do help reduce accidents, and they do significantly reduce the number of violations. Also, repeat offenders. The repeat offender rate in most of our programs is below 10%, and it's below 5% in the majority of the programs that we run. So people who get a violation generally don't get a second violation I don't know a better way to prove out that the program's working than that statistic. So it's important to have good public awareness, good messaging, and yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. That's good information. Lieutenant Collar, what do you guys do with the funding, the revenue generated there in your jurisdiction?
So for our jurisdiction, we it goes into the general fund for the city, but mainly we try to get back into the city for kids. So we use a lot of it for the public safety cadets, which is a cadet program for kids in high school, middle school and high school that are interested in law enforcement. We also do summer programs for the city kids, like a junior police academy, where they spend a couple weeks with us and we do fun things with them. That helps fund that as well. It is also used per the law. The only thing it can do is go back into any type of equipment, cars, computers, stuff that helps speed enforcement, LiDARs, radars, Alka sensors, stuff like that. It cannot be used for hiring employees or their salaries. So basically anything that go back into the department for equipment and technology. But like I said, we do use that as well, but we also try to put back some into the community for the kids and stuff.
Great. Thank you, sure. I know it's going to be a lot more palatable by our constituency if that money is going somewhere back into traffic safety initiatives, education, wherever it might land. So that's going to be important as we move forward with this. Corporal Klein, what do you guys do with your revenue?
We haven't done a whole lot with it so far. We have purchased some battery operated miniature, if you will, jaws of life that can open up steel doors and fortified doors in schools if we run into a situation like they had in Uvalde, where they encountered a steel door and an active shooter on the other side. And they were scrambling around keys and things like that. Each precinct has 2 of those tools that they can use out on the road in an active shooter situation to be able to open up fortified doors or steel doors in a school shooting situation or an active shooter situation. Also, we're going to be putting some money into our behavioral health unit, which is a new unit that we just implemented here in Gwinnett, where you have specially trained officers and clinicians who ride together in a patrol car that can respond to agitated chaotic event or a mental health crisis at a home, where we can actually do the involuntary committal paperwork from the scene instead of having to go through emergency room doctor, society, what we call a 1013 or a Baker Act or whatever it is that you call it in your state. We can sign those on the scene with the clinician. So we're going to be putting some money toward the behavioral health unit. That's all I know about so far.
Do you want us to answer some of the, I'm sorry, Todd, do you want us to answer some of these questions that are on your list, or you can wait till the end?
Yeah, I mean, so I have one more question for both of you, and that has to deal with the efficacy of the program. What you've seen since it's been implemented. You know, I mean, you put an automated traffic enforcement system into your jurisdiction because you want to see a desired results. Have you guys, since it's been implemented, have you seen that? And what is the data that you've, been able to extract out of it to show it? And Roy, I'll start with you.
Actually, you start with Eric. I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry. I'm having an IT guy come look at my computer. I'm sorry. Repeat it.
No problem. Eric, did you hear my question?
It was spotty.
Okay. I basically, what from both of you guys, what I'm hoping to get is, there was a reason you implemented an automated traffic enforcement system in your jurisdiction. There's a desired result that you wanted to see, basically the efficacy of the program. Since you've installed it, have you seen that? And what is the data that you can point to that backs it up that it's making a difference and slowing people down?
Gotcha. So I keep a tally of how many citations I write a day, a week, and I put it into a spreadsheet so that the command staff can look at it at any point to see how many violations we're having at a location, how many citations have been paid in a location, how many repeat violators we have at a location, and to see the reduction of numbers from one time frame to another to show that we're getting less violations after a period of time at a specific location. But like I was saying earlier, we have our county's huge. It's 438 square miles. And we have the largest school system in the state. So our numbers are naturally going to be higher than most smaller jurisdictions. To add with that, we also have a large interstate system that connects Atlanta with Athens, which we have a lot of people that come through Gwinnett that don't live in Gwinnett. They're just simply traveling to work. They go through these school zones and get tickets. One thing I wanted to mention too is state law in Georgia says we can issue tickets at 11 miles an hour over the speed limit. In Gwinnett, our commissioners would not sign off on the program unless we agreed to do 15 miles an hour over the speed limit. They wanted to basically take into account that if you had an officer sitting in a school zone, are they going to write a ticket at 11 over in the school zone, or are they going to write one at 15 over? So I guess out of fairness and taking the guesswork out of it with different vehicles and weights of vehicles and the grades of road and things like that, and surface conditions, they just said do it at 15 over all the time. So if we were at 11 over, I would be working 15-hour days on this thing all day long. I would have 20,000 citations a week.
Todd, if I could tag onto that, it's important that the legislation does have a threshold, like they've mentioned, and generally speaking, that's 10 or 11 miles per hour over. But that doesn't prevent or preclude an individual jurisdiction for enforcing it something higher than that. So you absolutely have the flexibility to do that. You just never want to enforce it something that's unrealistic. We happen to have one jurisdiction that enforces at 7 miles per hour over, which we fought to try to convince them not to do that. And they're buried with violations. They can't get to them all. So you need something that's realistic, 10, 11 plus miles per hour over. And again, that individual jurisdiction, as long as they're not going below the state mandated, legislatively mandated threshold, they can bump it up if they want.
And I think that's what keeps the court cases down to about 1% of violators, at least in Gwinnett, because you can argue in court, yeah, I was doing 11 over, but when you're at 15 over, your argument kind of doesn't hold as much weight in court. It's more unrealistic to find that justifiable to drive 15 over.
And for our jurisdiction, you were talking about, is it showing it's working? Like I said, 21 and 22, we saw a 37% decrease in violations, which means people are not speeding. So to me, that shows that that it's working. We can also break it down per speeds as well, and the speeds have lowered. And I know a lot of the comments about the 11 and stuff like that, and like Scott said, in Georgia, everybody except for the state police, we can't stop anything for anything less than 11. It has to be 11 and over before we can even look at it. So while school is where the kids are out walking to school, parents are dropping them off, we enforce that 11. And then once all the kids are in school during the day and they're not walking around on the sidewalks close to the roadway, we bring it back up to 14 during the daytime. And like Eric said, our department's policy is even when we're running laser, it might be different for Nevada, or over y'all's area, but we give 14 miles an hour. And I know that's a trade secret. Don't come to Georgia and just do 14, because again, state police can stop you for anything. So, but most jurisdictions, they won't start looking at you unless you're doing 14 and over, which might be why we have a speeding problem on our interstates. But again, above my pay grade. So.
Thank you, guys. Great information. I'm going to try to get to a couple of the questions in the chat that it seems like you've answered most of them, but Mike Broward, who is a lieutenant with the Reno Police Department, has one in here. Is there a way to see, quote unquote, how many times an offender vehicle subsequently passes through the area? Meaning via numbers, we could also show that a violation has occurred again, despite the vehicle passing through the area X times since.
Go ahead, Eric. I'll catch up on you.
Okay. So each jurisdiction who has the cameras is going to have their own database. Like I can't look at Lieutenant Collier's violators on my computer. He can't look at my violators. but I can put a tag in and say that I have a vehicle that I'm like, hey, I know that, I remember that name because I just wrote them a ticket yesterday. And I can put the tag number of their name in and search it to see how many prior violations that they have. And just to add something else on there too is, in order, I guess, to hold people's feet to the fire to have them pay their citation. If you don't pay your citation, then we put a hold on your registration, and that you can't sell your vehicle in the state of Georgia, and you can't renew your tag in the state of Georgia until you pay the fines that are attached to the tag, the registration. So then we ran into an issue where we had out-of-state drivers coming through Gwinnett, racking up tickets, weren't paying the tickets, and we have no recourse, basically had no recourse on having those people be compelled to pay those citations. So we ended up going with the collection agency so they can put it on their credit to have them pay those citations for people who work out of the, or who live out of the state.
For us, when you're approving a citation, when you're going through it, obviously it shows the picture of the vehicle, date, time, stamp, along with the speed, what camera it's from, but underneath it gives a list. Sometimes you won't see anything. It'll be the first violation, and some of them will be like a whole list of where they've been stopped before. It also gives you the status, if it's been sent to court, if they paid it, if it's on a registration hold. So as you're going through the citations, you can look at seeing the vehicles if they've been through there before, as well as what Eric said, that you can also type in the tag number or a vehicle number or citation number and see how many times it's been cited for.
Yeah, if I can chime in as well to clarify a bit, these most automated enforcement systems have the ability to perform automatic license plate recognition. It's usually a small additional fee, depending if the vendor is going to manage that data or if the department is. But if the system is equipped with ALPR, then you would be scanning every plate and capturing every plate each time it passes any of the cameras in your jurisdiction.
Thanks, Sean. Real quick, Lieutenant Broward put one more in there. I guess to clarify, similar to plate scan technology, do these systems log every vehicle passing through regardless of speed?
So with RedSpeed's system, there's a secondary website you can go to called SiteOps, SiteOps, and it records, the cameras record 24/7, records everything, and it holds the data for about 42 to 45 days in the system. So I can log on to SiteOps and say, you had a hit and run last week at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can pull up the footage from that day and that time and get video of the vehicles going through. Each one of our speed cameras also has a automatic license plate reader in it that we use through a company called Flock. And I don't know if that's specific to Georgia or not, but Flock is software that we use to record every vehicle that's coming by that location 24/7. And that's held in the Flock database forever. But I can go back about 42 to 45 days and get 24-hour footage of where that camera's pointed at.
And that's the same with ours. Ours is integrated with our Flock cameras as well. If you're not familiar with Flock, just a quick rundown. It's a tag reader and it alerts us to stolen cars, wanted people, armed robbery suspect, you can pretty much set it whatever you want, but it alerts us to vehicles that are important. And our cameras and our RedSpeed cameras, the 4 that we have, are integrated with that. So if a vehicle runs past that, it captures a tag, and it also will alert us if it's one of those vehicles that we're looking for, or they're wanted or stolen and stuff like that. So it's integrated with that as well.
And Todd, you can also, they mentioned storage and how long data is recorded. So that can be set in the business rules with the individual jurisdiction in terms of how long you want to keep data, how long you want to keep data of events that happen, how long you want to keep data of actual violations. So that can all be managed through individual business rules with the jurisdiction. So there shouldn't be any concerns with that.
Right, it's similar to their body camera storage or
Right.
whatever other systems they have, yeah. Scott, real quick, most people probably saw this one in the chat, but Lori Sanders put the question in there. Is it possible to put these cameras on intersections? Can you speak to that really quick?
Yeah, for sure. And I think Sean responded on that one, but and we're talking about like putting them on mast arms or separate, separate poles near intersections. We do that in multiple places. You might think of, a typical red light camera, which would be an example of that. But in Oregon, for example, they passed legislation 2-3 years ago, and we've been doing this in Canada for a decade or two, where you actually can do what's referred to as speed on green. So you can capture speeding violations at traffic controller or intersection locations as well. So you have the ability to do that with our system. It's really just flipping a switch, and there's an additional charge associated with it because you're capturing more violations. And in places like Oregon, there are certain things inside the legislation that if you're speeding through the legislation, if you're speeding through the red light, you have to be like 20 miles per hour over the posted speed to get both a red light and a speeding violation, something like that. And if you're like 11 to 20 miles per hour, then you can only get one or the other, a red light or a speeding violation. But is it possible? Absolutely. And we do it today.
Thank you, guys. Interesting question here from Kelly Norman. In Nevada, there is a resistance to cameras, which for now they're not authorized for use here in the state. For the gentleman out of Georgia, did Georgia have to overcome that hurdle as well?
So there was a hurdle at first. It was the whole Big Brother's watching you theory. But when explained that we're not capturing the information off the tag, obviously we can. All the tag shows is that it's the vehicle, or a vehicle, the make of the vehicle, the VIN, and all the other stuff. And obviously, if a law enforcement officer runs that tag, which we can do we can get the information of the owner of the vehicle. But all the cameras do is just capture the picture of the vehicle and the tag. And if anything's associated with that tag, that's what comes back as if they're being wanted or, involved in a crime or something like that. So once the public started realizing that, and actually it was helping law enforcement to actually catch criminals, that very dangerous criminals, come around to where it's not really an issue anymore. But it does work. Like I said, it just captures the tag and the picture. Same thing with red. It's capturing the vehicle and giving the speed and the vehicle information. It's not gathering data and putting it in a database of. That's what they're concerned about.
Thank you. Well, I promised you guys that I would keep you to around 11 o'clock in our time, and that's what time it is. So I want to sincerely thank our panelists for your participation today. Much appreciate. You guys have given us a ton of great information as we try to move forward with this initiative here in Nevada. And for all the folks that are participating, OTS has recorded this event. We will put it out to all our traffic safety stakeholders, along with the email addresses for the gentlemen that participated today, so you guys can ask them follow-up questions. All right, thank you guys very much again. Appreciate your time today, and you guys have a great day.
Thank you.